We're going to have a look at how to graph reciprocal functions. And before we do that, there are a couple of themes that it might be worth thinking about. Now, reciprocals are 1 over some number. Let's call it n. So for example, if I had a number, for example 2, then my original function, my original value would be 2. And when I take the reciprocal, I end up with 1 over 2. So I want to think about this theme that when this bottom number increases, what happens to my fraction? My fraction starts to become 1 over a bigger number. And therefore, as my bigger number, as my denominator gets larger, my entire value actually gets smaller. So, the bigger the denominator, the smaller the overall number. And likewise, the smaller the denominator, the bigger the overall number. That's one of the basic principles we're going to keep while we look at graphing reciprocal functions. Another principle is that if my denominator is positive, then my value is also going to be positive. So my signs will be the same when I take a reciprocal function. And a third consideration is that if I have a denominator which is 0, then I can't have, or I don't have a value for the entire fraction, which means this 1 over 0 is undefined. And graphically, that becomes an asymptote, whether it's horizontal or vertical. And we're probably more likely to talk about vertical asymptotes. So we're going to put these three things together to start graphing reciprocal functions. So now let's pretend we've got some function, and I'll draw that function in blue. And we need to find the reciprocal of this function. Now, it just happens that I've gone through the origin. That certainly wasn't deliberate. My reciprocal function, I'll draw in yellow. So first of all, we need to remember that 1 over a large number is a small number. So here, where I have a large value, I'll have a small value for my reciprocal function. Then as my number gets smaller, my reciprocal function will get larger and larger. Now here we've got a point where my blue function equals 0. If we notice here, 1 over 0, we have an asymptote. So that means I'm going to have an asymptote at this value. So let's draw that in now. And my reciprocal function, that's meant to be a straight line, is going to asymptote up there. Imagine that that's some asymptotic behavior. I still have positive values, but now I have negative values here. When I have a negative value that's very small, my reciprocal function is going to be very large and negative. As the value starts to become a larger negative number, then my reciprocal is going to be a smaller negative number. It will turn around here, and again, this becomes an asymptote. Now, it's worth keeping in mind that here is an important point as well. If my y value equals -1, then my reciprocal value will also equal -1. 1 over -1, which equals -1. So I'm assuming here that this value is not at -1. It's somewhere between 0 and -1. Otherwise, this yellow line would come and touch it. If this was at -1, the yellow line and the blue line would be in the same place. But here's another important feature, that if I have a y value of -1 or +1, then my reciprocal value will also be -1 or +1. Now let's come back to this part of the graph we have a very small positive value, and we're going to have another asymptote here where it crosses. So I'll draw the asymptote in, and we can see here 1 over a very small number is a very large number. 1 over a very small positive number here is a very large positive number. So my reciprocal function will look something like that. And then again, I have a very small negative number, and 1 over a very small negative number is a very large negative number. And as the blue line increases and becomes a larger and larger negative number, my reciprocal will become a smaller negative number. So my reciprocal function might end up looking something like that. So that's how I can use a function and consider these rules, and potentially the pink one here as well, to draw a reciprocal function. We're now going to explore some specific functions and see how we go. If you like this or any of my other videos, please subscribe to my channel or like the video. Thanks.